Today we will be talking about qualitative research design and some details. I was not sure where to start from. Usually when you give a workshop or something like that, Dr. Asim, can you please admit the people in the waiting rooms?
Yes, Doctor, I'm admitting them.
Yeah, thank you. So usually when you know your audiences, you know exactly where to start from. If you're starting from scratch or you're starting from the middle, or if they're advanced, you never know. So today, if I say something that you're already familiar with, so please be patient. I'll try to, jump between levels, and definitely by the end of this session, there will be Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any question. So I am going to start with the differences between qual and quan, or qualitative and quantitative research. Probably, to the best of my knowledge, many of you are familiar with quantitative research, but probably not with qualitative. So I thought it could be a good idea to just make a comparison in the beginning between qualitative and quantitative, and see where those come to agree and where those come to disagree.
Jacob, you're muted.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if someone... Did you hear what I said from the beginning, or was I just muted now? Unmuted now, or what?
Just right now, with the start of comparison.
So I don't have to repeat everything. Good.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I thought it would be a good idea to make a comparison between the qualitative and the quantitative, and let's start this comparison with the linguistic roots of the words. So the word qualitative comes from the word quality, and then the word quantitative comes from the word quantity, or the number. All of us know that for sure. So that would bring us to the differences in focus. What is the focus of the qualitative research and the focus of the quantitative research? In qualitative, we are concerned with the interpretation of the data, with the complexity of the data, the deepness, the sophistication, the richness of the data that we collect. That's our concern. That's our goal. That's what we want to do. But when it comes to quantitative, it's more of quantity, frequency, magnitude. I'm not an expert when it comes to quantitative, so don't expect much from me when it comes to quant, but you can expect a lot, inshallah, when it comes to qualitative. So that was the focus. Now let's move on to the philosophical stances, because these research designs, they come from philosophical approaches and stances. As for the qualitative, they come from what we call, these are all theories that I'm going to mention now, the social constructivism, or the interpretivism, the post-structuralism or postmodernism. These theories in philosophy and in literature, in sociology, and in other social sciences as well, when they come to interpret realities, they do care more about an individual as a person, not as a whole society, because person of an individual that we have to pay attention to before we can have a bigger picture and look at the whole society or a whole community. So one single individual in qualitative research is indeed very, very important and very precious. And they say there is nothing that we can call reality, one single reality that we can measure, that we can see, but there are multiple realities. There are interpretations. What could be true to you might not be true to someone else. The way you see things, the way you see life, the way you see realities are different. These all ways are different from the ways other people see them. So we do care about you as an individual. But when it comes to quantitative research, They are, or these methods in quantitative, they come from a theory that is called positivism. And positivism is a theory that considers realities as discrete, as, we can see reality, we can measure reality, we can talk about reality in an objective to understand, to explore, to describe, to discover. These are not the goals, generally speaking, when it comes to quantitative research, because our goals there would be to test, to measure, to predict, to confirm, to control. These are the goals when it comes to quantitative, but not when it comes to qualitative. Now, this takes us to the sample size. Now, since I'm not interested in qualitative research to test or measure or predict or control all these things, so when it comes to the sample size, do I really care about the number? No. The word number is not an interest to qualitative researchers. It's not at all, so it could be one. Just you can have a whole study dedicated to just one participant. There are a lot of research published out there, and the number of participants is just one. But that when it comes to quantitative, we do care about the population, the sample number. The number should be representative, because in the end we are going to generalize these findings, so we have to have a bigger sample. Research questions. For the qualitative, we usually ask open-ended questions, like I'm going to talk more about this later in this webinar. When it comes to quantitative, we ask usually close-ended questions. Data collection, interviews, observation, documents, artifacts. These are all things that we do analyze in qualitative, but for quantitative, questionnaires, scales, tests. And then data analysis, you can do it manually in qualitative. You don't have to use any software, or you can use some softwares like NVivo 12 or Atlas.ti. In quantitative, there's the SPSS, there's the R, and a bunch of other software as well. Okay, let's move on to, I already covered this, the philosophical stances and how beneficial they can be when looking at different research methods. Okay, now let's move on to a research bias. Someone might say, well, wait a second, how about the bias? Now, since you're going to do some interpretations, you're going to just talk about the data you have collected. Isn't there going to be any bias? Yeah, well, definitely, of course. We're all biased. We're all biased in a way or another. Actually, the word objectiveness, or things can be objective, is just nonsense when it comes to qualitative research. Qualitative researchers believe that nothing could be 100% objective, because when we narrate things, we narrate things through perspectives. We put ourselves and our opinions in a way or another, whether we're aware of this or unaware of it, but it's there. So you cannot just claim that something is 100% objective. That's not true, However, in quantitative research, researchers still say, no, we still can be objective. I can, as a researcher, I can isolate myself completely from my study, completely from the data analysis. These are questionnaires. These are, surveys. I'm just collecting data. I'm giving the data to SPSS. The SPSS is going to run some tests and, going to come up with the results and the findings, and I'm completely out of this whole process. But then the qualitative researcher will say, wait a second. Now, who designed the questionnaires? Who put the research questions? It's a human, it's a person. Who answered them? Also a human, a person, somebody, someone, right? So still there is some bias in the way you design, you come up with the research questions, or the way people answer. Then the quantitative researcher would say, but well, I do validate it. There's something called validity and reliability, right? I do that. But even though when you do that, there is still a chance for bias. I'm not going to spend more time on talking about the research bias, but we have to admit it. And later in this webinar, I'll be talking about how to admit that, how to present that, the research bias, the term or the concept of validity in qualitative research, how we deal with it as qualitative researchers. So let's move on to qualitative designs. Now I have a topic, I'm interested in exploring something, and now it's time to choose a design. Do we have one single design? No, it's not one single design. We have multiple designs in qualitative research. These range from narrative to grounded theory. They include ethnographic studies, case studies, phenomenological or grounded theory. I'm going to briefly talk about these different designs. So narratives, from the word narrative, you know, it's a story, because these are synonyms, right? Narrative and story, these are just synonyms. So a narrative is a story of somebody, someone. So in qualitative designs that adopt narrative designs or narrative style, they are interested in exploring, you know, the stories. We use the word lived experiences, you know, the lived experiences of one person or more. They could be 2, 3, depending on your participants number, you know. So you're interested in their stories, and when you hear the word story or the word narrative, there is like the beginning of the story, how the story started. There's the climax. There are, you know, a rising action. There are, you know, falling actions. Those of you that studied literature would understand what all of these terms mean. But there has to be a story by the end of the day when it comes to analyzing this data. Ethnography, or the ethnographic design, when you're interested in studying a cultural group in a natural setting. So you indulge yourself, you get in that group, you participate with them, you take part, you become a part of that group to study them, you know. And the word ethnography, it comes from, you know, back in the days when people in Europe wanted to study some tribes in Africa, and they would travel and they would live with them. They want to understand how they make sense of life, you know, how they experience their, you know, daily life. So they would live with them for a month, 2, sometimes even longer periods of time. And they would look at, you know, the relationship, the family things, the tribal things. They look at all of that. So here comes the word ethnographic. So if you want to do an ethnography, you have to indulge yourself in the group that you're studying. You have to be a part of that group. Case study, the word case could refer to an event, could refer to a program, could refer to an individual, a person, a process. You know, the word case study could refer to any of these. So you're interested in a case, you want to explore that case, you want to explore that program, that individual, that person, you know. So that's the word case study. It could be one, it could be more than one, it could be multiple case studies. Phenomenological comes from the word phenomenal. The word phenomenon, as we know, there's something that you're interested to understand. It's not a person, it's not an individual, it's not a program, you know, it's not a story, but it's a phenomenon that you want to study. It's a phenomenon that you want to explore. So you would interview and you would observe, you know, multiple people that are involved with this phenomenon to understand it. Grounded theory, you know, from the word theory, the word grounded, if there isn't a theory that could provide a rationale for your study, that you can use as a theoretical framework or conceptual framework, and you think you can come up with your own theory, then you can use this grounded theory. So grounded theory means you are going to derive a theory. You are going to come up with a theory in your data, okay? But this theory is grounded in the views of your participants. And as a piece of advice, you wouldn't start with that. If you're not an expert on qualitative research, you can't just start your first experience with grounded theory. You'll have to do other types first, I would say easier types, you know, and then you can end up doing some kind of grounded theory at the end. So it's not recommended at all to start with a grounded theory. Okay, from there, let's move on to this question. Now, I talked about this kind of multiple designs, and some of you might say, well, how about content analysis? Is that approach or design or method considered to be qualitative or quantitative? Well, I'm not sure if someone is interested in answering that. If someone want to answer that, I'll be more than willing, I'll be more than happy to hear the answer. If not, I can just give you the answer. I don't know. Would someone like to give me an answer to this? Content analysis. You have a content and you want to analyze that. Is that considered qualitative or quantitative? Someone like to answer?
We have an answer for comments saying qualitative.
Okay.
Dr. Nurhan, Dr. Habital say it's qualitative. Anyone else?
Yeah, you can put your answer in the chat. Qualitative, okay. Yeah, Galaxy A12 there isn't a name there, but yes, that's the right answer. Yes, and I think it could be both. How? Well, depending on your goal. If your goal is to count and measure, you know, the frequency of some words mentioned in the content that you're analyzing, then it becomes quantitative. You're dealing with numbers, you know. But if your end goal is to interpret and understand and explore things in the content, then it becomes qualitative. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to the research design, research questions. In qualitative, usually we ask questions with what, how, to what extent. These are just examples, like what are the experiences of people working night shifts in healthcare? You're a doctor, or I think the sweeping majority of you guys are doctors, like medical doctors or medical students. So what if you want to understand the experiences of people working in night shifts in healthcare? This is a qualitative study if you ask the question this way, because you have the topic is there. Now it's you who decides how would you want to take that topic, which route. Do you want to do a qualitative design or do you want to do a quantitative design? So if you ask such a question, what are the experiences of people working in night shifts in healthcare, then it becomes qualitative. You would meet a number of some of those professionals, you know, asking them questions about their experiences, trying to understand their experiences, trying to make sense of these experiences, presenting their experiences in the end. Now, this is qualitative. Another example, how would overweight people describe their meal times while dieting? Now, this is again, because you're depending on them telling you their own experiences, telling you their own stories. The last one is one that we actually did. I'm going to use it as an example later in this presentation. What are the enablers and barriers of COVID-19 vaccination acceptance in the Arab region? So Dr. Effet, Dr. Rami Ghazi, and other some researchers, including myself, we conducted this qualitative study. I think it was a year ago, and it was qualitative. I'm going to actually share the whole study and show you how we did it step by step. Okay, so now the data, the data that you want to collect in qualitative study? What are these, types of data? There are interviews. That's number one. When we're talking about qualitative, we talk about interviews. That's like the major thing. The top type of qualitative data is interviews. You would interview people. When we're talking about interviews, we're talking about opinions, perspectives, narration, how people would narrate things. When there is an event, imagine that you work somewhere and you miss a day, okay, and something happens, and then the next day you come back to work and you ask different people to tell you what happened yesterday. What you notice is different opinions. Someone might say, this is what happened. You talk to another person and he or she might give you a little bit of a different opinion or perspective. Why? Because the event that happened yesterday that you missed is now being described, being narrated, being interpreted to you by another person. And that other person has backgrounds, has cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, political backgrounds, has knowledge of the event, prior knowledge probably. So he or she is going to narrate or tell you what happened impacted by all of these factors. We can take this back and relate it to the concept of bias in qualitative research when I talked about it in the beginning. So when it comes to qualitative, you have to admit that there is some type of bias there. It all comes down to how would you admit that? How would you try to make sense of this bias, and make your readers aware of this type of bias? So we said interviews, documents, you can collect documents and you can analyze documents. Focus groups. What is focus groups? Focus groups are a part or a type of interviews, but instead of interviewing one person alone, you can have a group of interviewees, a group of respondents, a group of participants sitting together, and you sit with them, and then you would ask them questions. What is the benefit of a focus group, and why would I do that? Sometimes, and those participants in the focus group will have to share the thing that you're talking about. Let's say your topic is you're investigating or examining the, how would parents of children or diabetic children, how would parents treat them or deal with them? So you would sit with a group of parents and you would talk to them about their experiences treating or dealing with this, disease. If you sit alone with every one of them, that participants might forget something, right? But now when you put them in a focus group, they will remind each other of things that they wouldn't be able to do that alone. So you would ask a question, and then you would hear someone saying something, and then another participant would comment, would agree, would disagree, and all of these interactions and these reactions, you record them, you observe them. They are part of your data collection. Observation, you do, part of the focus group is actually observation, but observation is also considered to be data in qualitative studies. So you would observe a group of sick people, patients, a group of students, a group of teachers, a group of doctors. You would observe something, you would attend and observe and take notes. You keep taking notes. If you have a camera there, you can video record whatever that thing you're observing to help you analyze it. But here in the States, we have what we call the IRB. What is the IRB? It's short for Institutional Review Board. You cannot start any research involving human beings without getting the approval from the IRB in your institution. What they do. Now, you write your proposal, okay? They usually have this form, and they will have you fill it out. They ask you about your topic. They ask you about your research problem statement. They ask you about your research questions. And then if you're doing interviews, you have to write down the questions that you are going to ask during the interviews. And then they ask you about the risks that might be involved in your study. And you give it to them, they review it, and they tell you if you can do that or not, or you have to do some kind of modifications. Why? Because you have to protect your research participants. They have some rights to be protected. What if you, let's say you're video recording a setting, an event, a celebration, because you are interested in exploring something. And what if someone is not interested in being recorded? You know, he or she has the right not to be video recorded, not to be on the camera. What if you ask some kind of leading questions or biased question that might make your participants feel uncomfortable, right? So the review board will decide if you can do that or not, if there is risk involved in your study or not. So usually you have to do that. I'm not familiar with the Egyptian context or other research contexts in other countries, but I'm talking about the USA. Like, you have to do that. It's not an option. Some journals, when you submit a research to be published, they ask for the IRB protocol. They say, send us your IRB. We just want to make sure that you obtained it before you start your study. Okay. Now let's move on to the data analysis. Okay, now you came up with your research questions. You collected your data either from interviews or observation or focus groups or documents. Now it's the time to start analyzing your data. Number one, you have to be familiar with your own data, right? You have to be familiar with it. You familiarize yourself with the data. Read it. Read it over again and again, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Try to understand things just beforehand, in the beginning, before you start analyzing your data. Read it very well. Be familiar with it. And then you start coding. Code what? And there's something before that. You have to transcribe it. If it's audio, then you have to transcribe the audio into written transcripts. Why? Because this makes it easy for you to code. What is coding? Now, coding is putting down your transcripts of the interviews or the documents or the transcripts of the focus groups or the notes from the observation. And then you start coming up with codes. And these codes together will make up the themes that you will present in your paper. Let's say someone, the example that I gave you about working night shifts for medical doctors. You interview, let's say, 10 participants, and someone mentions something, and this same thing comes up in another interview. So you would highlight that. So that's one code. Someone probably talking about fatigue or being tired. So that would make up one code. Another participant would probably mention extra pay. So that would make up another code if it's mentioned in another interview. So you come up with these codes, and then usually you end up getting 50, 60 codes. In our research that I was talking about, the enablers and barriers of COVID-19 vaccination acceptance in the Arab world, we came up with a lot. I don't remember the exact number, but they were close to 100. And then we have to merge them You have to see the differences. If we can combine or merge 2, 3, 4, 5 codes together to make up one theme at the end. And then, so from transcripts to coding to themes, and then to the discussion of these themes. You would discuss, the word that is used is make sense. You would make sense. You would put these themes into a context, because we cannot take something out of a context and talk about it. And this is something to the core of qualitative research. They usually care about the context. If you, let me give you an example. Even a word, if I give you the word, if I write down a word, M-I-N-U-T-E, and ask you, what is the meaning of this word? You tell me, we'll put it in a context, so I can give you the meaning. Could be a minute, a unit of time, could be minute, something very tiny, very small, right? So I cannot just I cannot make sense of it until you put it in a context. You have to contextualize your data to make sense, to be able to present it in your paper. And this is your role as a researcher, is when you come up with these themes, you would discuss them, you would put them into a context of the country, context of the time, context of the phenomenon, context of the age of the participants, the backgrounds of the participant, whatever context is there, you have to contextualize your own findings. And then, what time is it now? Okay. And then you will move on to, okay, can I do that manually? Yeah, well, actually, until, some recent times, it was all done manually. And until now, I know a lot of qualitative researchers that they like to do that manually. They would just, transcribe their audio. They would print them out. They would bring different highlighting colors, and they would start to highlight the codes or the themes, or the codes that become themes later in different colors. If they find one code, they would, let's say, yellow highlight that. And then a different code, they would green highlight that. And then a third one, they would blue highlight that. And they would do that manually just fine, no problem. But there are some software out there in the market that you can use to help you, such as NVivo 12, and we use that in the paper that we published, or Atlas.ti. And what these software do is that they just help you organize. They actually don't do the work that you as a researcher have to do. They just help you organize things. Unlike SPSS or R, some software in quantitative where they do the test and they, give you the results. It doesn't do that here, What it does is actually something like this. So you would create one file for each participant. You would read them and then you would start highlighting them. It makes it easy for you to do it through a software. You would highlight it and then you would right click and choose the node or the code that you have created yourself. And then you find similar finding in another transcript, and then you would also right click and add it to the same code. And then you do it with the third one, the third participants, the fourth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. You keep doing that. And then it makes it easy for you when you go to the code. It tells you exactly all the things that you have highlighted, so it makes it easy. So it just helps you organize. It facilitates the process of analyzing your data, but it's still, you do the bulk, the majority of the work. It's you as a researcher that does that. Okay, now to the validity. We talked about it earlier, and I promised that I would be talking about it in a little bit more detail. So validity, it has different names actually, like Lincoln and Goba. But these names, Maxwell, Criswell, these are big names and big scholars in qualitative research. So sometimes they use different terms. So Lincoln and Goba, they use the word trustworthiness. Maxwell uses the word validity. Criswell uses the word validation. I found other terms as well to describe the same thing: credibility, confirmability, dependability, transferability. These are all terms that, you know, describe the same thing, which is validity. How valid are these findings? How dependable are they? How trustworthy are these findings? You know, so they talk about that. And, you know, usually there are two terms that we talk about: reliability, right? Something reliable, and validity. And I'll give you a very helping idiom that can help you understand this, those of you that are not familiar with the differences between validity and reliability. Something reliable. Let's say you are on the first floor in your house and you want to go up to the attic, or let's say second floor, because the houses in the Middle East don't have attics. So let's say second floor. So how are you going to go up from first floor to second floor? You would need to use stairs, right? So staircase, the stairs that you are going to go up and use to move from first floor to second floor, they have to be strong. They have to be reliable, right? They have to take your weight and be able to carry you without falling apart. Now, you examine the stairs and they are very, very reliable. They're very strong. So you start moving up. Now it's reliable. And what? They're taking you to the ceiling. Are they valid? They're not valid. Yes, they're reliable, but they're not valid. When do they become valid? If they take you to the second floor, only then they become valid, okay? So reliability and validity, these are two different terms in research that we use. So your method will have to be validated and, you know, valid and reliable at the same time. These are the strategies that we use for validity in qualitative research. There's the term triangulation. You know, triangulation, from the linguistic root of the word, when you think of triangle, what is that? Something that has three points, three steps. It's not one thing, it's three things. So triangulation claims to treat the problem of validity in qualitative data by collecting data from more than one source. They say only interviews, you know, not enough. You have to either add something else to it, like focus groups or some artifacts. The word artifact in qualitative data could mean anything you can collect to analyze. It could be a text. It could be it could be a note, could be a picture, could be a video, could be anything that can help you understand the phenomenon or the thing that you are exploring and analyzing. So triangulation says it's not enough to rely on interviews only or one of the sources only, but you have to add other sources as well, so that if you do so, your findings will be valid. Saturation. What is saturation? From the word saturate, when you have enough. You do an interview with someone and she would give you the answers, and you would do it with another person, a third person, and a fourth person, and you feel that the answers are the answers start to be the same, repeating the same things over and over again. So now you say, okay, I have reached saturation. Member checking. Sometimes when you do interviews, you would misinterpret or misunderstand something that a participant has said to you. So member checking, the word member here refers to the research participants. You would go back to them and you say, hey, now I have interviewed you, I have transcribed the interview, and I have come up with my own analysis. can you please read it and tell me if what I said about you is what you meant, or did I misinterpret what you meant? Okay, that's different from your own interpretation, by the way. It just, you want to make sure that you accurately represent what that person, what the participant has said to you. And then another strategy is acknowledging your own positionality and bias. What is positionality? What is bias? Is your own background that can come into play when it comes to analyzing the data. You say, okay, now I'm a medical doctor and I'm doing research on medical doctors. I do have background in the field, you know, so my understanding of the phenomenon that I'm studying can intervene in the analysis, can impact the analysis. So you make your readers aware of this bias, aware of your own positionality by admitting it and telling your audiences to what extent that impact could be. External auditor is when you ask someone else to read it for you. Now you're done with your analysis, have someone else in the field, someone with experience, read the findings, read your transcripts, your coding, your themes, and tell you if they have any comments, or if something doesn't make sense, or probably if you have done something in a wrong way, so they would tell you what to do. So these are all strategies that are used for validity in qualitative research. Okay, so this is the example that I am going to show you now. Exploring enablers and barriers toward COVID-19 vaccine acceptance among Arabs. This is a qualitative study. Dr. 𝐏𝐡, or 𝐏𝐡 with 𝐴ين. Sorry, sometimes when I speak English, I don't know why I mispronounce the Arabic letters. So Dr. 𝐏𝐡 and myself, and then Dr. Omar Riyad, Dr. Barwa, Dr. Yasser, Dr. Khalid, Dr. Bayan, we all co-authored this piece. It was a year ago, and it's qualitative. We saw a phenomenon. That phenomenon is what? With COVID-19, there were these vaccines. Some people didn't like to take the vaccine, so we were interested in knowing why. What are the factors that make people accept vaccines? What are the factors that make people refuse to take vaccines? What are the factors, that make people hesitant, not sure if they should take it or not? What are their opinions? What are their understanding of COVID-19? Is it a true pandemic? Is it something made up, or what? So that was the goal behind conducting this study. So we interviewed 100 participants. Someone might say, wait a second, you just mentioned that the number or the sample in qualitative is not big, usually. Yes, that's right. 100 participants, when you look at the number of people that experienced the pandemic, what, 8 billion, right? A lot of people. So 100 is not that big number. As I was talking about the context, you have to put it in a context. So 100 participants, 44 males, and we have 56 females. They represent different age groups. We interviewed them. They come from different Arab countries, from Egypt, from Sudan, Libya, different Arab countries. So we asked them different questions about why they would accept or refuse the vaccine. This is a table of our participants, their gender, age, their education, occupation, country of residence, nationality. And this would all help the audiences put the results in a context and understand the findings in a better way. When they say, okay, well, this person has a postgraduate or graduate degree, so his or her understanding of the pandemic could be different from someone else that doesn't have it. This person is young, that person is old, so they would be able to contextualize the findings. We talked about the data saturation here, that it was reached in some countries, but not in others. And then we came up, so the original coding identified more than 70 themes. So we merged, we shrank them. So we came up at the end with 6 themes, only 6 themes from over 70, because we merged them. And then these themes were as follows. Trust. Some people trusted their governments, trusted their authorities, trusted their media. Some others didn't. Fear of COVID-19 and its vaccine. Some people had fears. They would think that, no, I shouldn't take that, because if I take that, there's, there are a lot of myths out there, they're going to kill us by these vaccines. This is a plan. This is whatever. Some people had this social or religious responsibility. They are public figures in their communities. People would trust them. They have some kind of, religious responsibility towards their family members or towards their community. So that would impact their understanding of the vaccines. Education, media influences, access and availability, anecdotal evidence, their own stories. So we discussed each of these themes alone. So trust, we started with trust, and then this is how we refer to the participants. Jordan 8 means a participant from Jordan, and we give him number or her number 8. And you cannot use real names. You have to use confidentiality in qualitative research. Everything has to be confident, and you should not ever mention the true names of the people, but you can refer them with some pseudonyms, fake names, or just participant number, whatever, or with the country. You choose how you like to represent your participant. So he or she said, I trust the healthcare system in Jordan. Since most people have medical insurance, the healthcare system is accessible to all people, and we have good skilled specialists. And then we would, discuss that and talk about it. In Egypt, someone said something similar, so we would combine that as well. It was a very interesting article that I would like for you guys to read it. It's open access. You can access this study and read it. Okay, let me get back. I'm not sure. Can you guys see this? Give me one second. Looks like I'm not sharing the right screen. Do you see it now?
Yes, we see it, Dr. Yaqub.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, I was talking about it, and I thought for some reason that you can see it, but then I realized that no, I didn't share it with you. Because this Zoom thing makes you choose what you like to share. Anyways, so again, it was published in the International Journal of Disaster and Risk Reduction. This is the title of the paper, and this is the paper. I would like for you to read it if you want to have an idea, if you want to make sense of the things that I said today, if you want to see a real example of a qualitative study and relate to all the concepts that I mentioned in the presentation today. Okay, now let me get back to the PPT. This is an activity